I mean, so you say. Oh, there we go.
There we go. It starts. As soon as we think, is it starting? Then it starts.
That's when it starts.
I was just admiring, Lloyd, the font that you've used for the Dice Cast on your thing. If I click it, let's have a look. It evokes Wild West to me. Was that intentional?
Yeah, I literally just like on XSplit, I typed the die, and I was like, oh, find a font. That one's nice. And then I went, it's cast, and I was like, well, that one's not quite nice. And that was it. There was almost no thought process that went into it.
Excellent. I dare say that this stream is going to evoke the sort of ambience that font is creating. I don't know how much we can attribute to the font, but there we go.
Do you think so?
Cool. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dice Cast. As ever, I'm joined by the unforgettable, the hit human being known as Lloyd Collins.
Howdy, y'all. This is me contributing to the cowboy thing, you see? The Wild West thing.
Oh, yeah. You went under the radar with me there, man. I didn't see you doing that. I really enjoy saying the hit like that, the hit, yes. Because if there's ever like a musical or based off the hit motion picture, like it's just one of my favorite things to say.
Smash hit, great one as well.
Which one?
The smash hit.
The smash hit, yeah, yes. That is also a good one. The smash hit, Vertical Limit. I don't know why that random film came to mind straight away. But anyway, enough of this lollygagging. We're here to talk about role-playing games. We're here to have a hopefully not too cyclical discussion about all things role-playing games. Lloyd, what is the first topic?
It's orcs, Rob. It's orcs.
Orcs, those lovely creatures.
You what?
Why are we talking about orcs?
Some guy posted something in a chat earlier. There was a discussion in AbTab about what's your most frequently used monster or something like that. Yeah. Which I thought was a good little thread.
Yeah, I meant to respond to that because I know mine's definitely undead, and that's because of the scale of that type. Yeah. Because it could be anything.
For sure, you can have from zombies to liches. You know.
Yeah.
Mine was a grim-faced man in a nasal helm. That's my most used bad guy.
Which I believe Matt said is also the same as your dating profile.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
that was beautiful. It's what we all want. Okay, so orcs. What, in your opinion, makes orcs effective? What do you think makes orcs ineffective?
So it depends, because the orcs in Middle-earth, which is what I'm most familiar with, are not the orcs from Dungeons and Dragons. They're quite different. In Middle-earth, they're just awful and evil and cruel and hateful, and like very resourceful, nigh unkillable. Some of them, you know, they'll come back. You fuck them up, they'll come back, and they're just like they embody all of the evil of Middle-earth. You know,
they do. Yeah.
Even the lowliest, shittiest orc like embodies Sauron to some extent. You know.
That's exactly it, and I think that's the really important thing to consider when talking about orcs from Middle-earth is that, and I suppose all races, they're all very much more interlinked. I believe the races of Middle-earth, they all serve the same kind of narrative. Like, although Lord of the Rings has a very in-depth world, like the only thing you're really ever talking about with Middle-earth is the battle against the darkness, the battle against the shadow. Like, that's the overall theme for all of it. So the fact that there is a race that embodies that, and it's the foot soldiers of that, and it is the representation on Earth as that, it makes them pretty formidable. And I mean, they also have their charm. This is the other thing. Like, if you play the Shadow of Mordor series, for instance, like the stars of the show, 100% are the orcs. There is
hit game,
the hit video game series, Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, which are both excellent games. I have to recommend them. But yeah, they have. Not only are they evil, but they also have. They're very. Yeah, there are varying degrees of them as well, because you get your terrifying menacing characters like Lurtz.
Yeah.
And is it Gothmog from Return of the King, where he's this
melty face,
mutant orc, and then you get some funny ones in that video game, for example, like Ratbag, who's just like trying to survive, and
you've got that in the Two Towers, the blue orc who's like, yeah, you know that guy?
Yeah,
can we have some meat? That guy's fucking great.
What about their legs? I don't need those.
Grishnak, so scary, like blind eyes, and he's awful. The discussion that happened earlier was that orcs in Middle Earth are like useless and shitty and not scary. And that's because they're fighting Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli, who are the three most powerful combatants in Middle Earth who aren't like Sauron and the Witch King. You know, like Aragorn is the king, and in Middle Earth that means way more than just like being the son of the previous king. Like royal blood in Middle Earth is like a superpower.
It is.
You know, because Tolkien is an old-fashioned person.
Very old-fashioned.
Legolas is a prince. Gimli is related to Thorin and related to like Durin, like all the way back. They're all royalty, and that means a lot in Middle Earth. And they're like exceptional, like really over-the-top, crazy exceptional. And so it's not a surprise when Aragorn pisses all over orcs, because he would also piss all over human warriors and, you know, possibly elven warriors. He's amazing. And it's demonstrated really well in that scene that we talk about a lot, where Éowyn is really struggling to fight Gothmog. She's like barely managing it. And he's like almost killed her. And then Aragorn, as an aside, chops his head off. Like he doesn't even stop to fight him, you know? And it's like, that's because Aragorn is the king, the king of men. It's a huge deal.
There's a suspension of disbelief that comes with all fantasy, but in particular with Lord of the Rings. I mean, Tolkien was inspired by, you know, Heroes of Yore, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mythic sort of figures. And to say that the orcs are ineffective because they're beaten by one man, Aragorn, I don't think so at all. You have to look at them of, okay, maybe they're not effective like in realistic terms, but why is realistic terms even a thing on this table at this point?
Yep.
You know,
but it's also kind of like saying like that the Roman legionaries were wusses because one time they fought a man with a machine gun and they lost. You know, like it's not. It doesn't equate. Like an orc shouldn't be able to stand up to Aragorn, son of Arathorn, King Elisar II. Like, you know, he's amazing, and Legolas too is like 8,000 years old. He's like the best in the world. Like, not surprised.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. So I mean, I'd say that they're the most effective orcs in fantasy, in my opinion. They're the most terrifying, and I think the reason they're most effective is not because they can't realistically beat one man. They're effective because of what they do for the storytelling.
Yeah,
it's what they do for the book series and, you know, the film series as well. You know, that's why they're effective, not because you're trying to sort of compare this to a real world in any way, you know.
I can remember being a little kid when my mum read me Lord of the Rings, and I was terrified of orcs, like really afraid of them, really frightened of them back then, you know.
Terrifying. In fact, I think some of the first nightmares I can remember are from is actually from The Hobbit, actually, because I was absolutely shit scared of Gollum. Yeah. I thought the idea of you being in this dark cave and all you can see are those eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy fuck, and there's this weird dude who is just like talking to you and sort of like hissing, and he's got like rotten fish everywhere and stuff. Like, the dude is horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Yeah. See, as a kid, yeah, absolutely crazy. But yeah, orcs, man. I mean, what would you say is another effective version of orcs? Let's talk about an ineffective one as well. Okay. But yeah, Warhammer. Yeah.
Warcraft. I mean, so in the Warcraft universe, orcs are like 10 feet tall, and like enormous, muscle-bound, ridiculous, over-the-top monsters. Like, they'll fuck you up. I watched that Warcraft movie, which I thought was like, it was popcorny, you know. I watched it and I was like, yep, this is what I expected. It's Warcraft. Like, what am I? I'm not expecting high drama. But in that, there's like a scene where like 3 orcs just kick the shit out of like lots of people because they're huge and they should. So they're like pretty effective, I think.
I did think that film was passable. I thought it had some excellent executions of certain ideas.
Yeah.
It just didn't. But anyway, Warhammer orcs I think are pretty cool, and 40k orcs in particular.
Yeah.
And one thing that I always remember about those particular orcs is in the Imperial Guard handbook that all the troops are given. They have all the descriptions of all the Xenos, all of the evil aliens, and it says, "Don't be fooled by their size. These orcs are weak, and they'll fall." They'll fall if you shed a single drop of their blood. Like it really sort of is hammering home that these things aren't to be worried about. But that's the only reason that's there is because they're just trying to convince people that it's going to be okay because it's so fucking terrifying to fight these things. Like they're trying to make out like it's not a big deal when it really is. Yeah. So that's what I always remember from them.
I do love the Warhammer orcs, and like in that world, they're like plants. So like they breed by spores. So when you kill an orc, he releases a bunch of spores, and then like whatever 1d8 days later, another couple of orcs will grow there. And they grow like really tiny, and then like the more that they kill and the more that they like batter other orcs, the bigger they get. And so they'll continue to get it. They're great. I really like the Warhammer orcs. I think D&D orcs get a bad rap. I think they're in the same vein as goblins in that extent. And I have used both goblins and orcs, I feel, well, and I think that you can make them really interesting. And there's a bit of stuff in Volos that makes them a little bit more interesting. I think there's like a lot to them. And just because they're like a low challenge rating doesn't mean that they're not very good at fighting. Like you shouldn't be fighting one of them anyway. You should be fighting 100 of them, or whatever amount of them. And yeah, they should be quite frightening. Matt had asked a question, which I think was really good. He says, Mike Morrow's made an interesting point about orcs recently. He said the strength of the orcs is not their physical prowess, but their resilience. We'd love to hear us talk about that. I don't know if you've ever seen, it's like a fairly famous, like I guess, Tumblr post or whatever about humans and how animals would look at humans. Like they can break a leg and not die. Or like they can get shot and live, or they can run for days and keep chasing you until you die because we're pursuit predators, or back in the Stone Age we were pursuit predators. And like that's really interesting to think about if you apply it to orcs who in D&D potentially are better at that than we are. Like I could see an orc fighting with a broken arm, or like having something cut off and continuing to fight and stuff. Which is really scary. Really, really, really scary.
Incredibly terrifying. Yeah. I think I have to agree with that term. I think that's a really deft observation to make, actually, is their resilience. And I think that it's not just their resilience physically. I think the idea of the orcs is a very resilient one because they can be anything at the same time. Orcs serve many different purposes throughout fantasy storytelling. Like for lore keepers, you've not fought a single orc. Nope. There are orcs out there somewhere, but I don't want to throw away the use of them. I know what they're doing, and I'm happy where they are. I don't want to waste them, if you know what I mean. Like just because I have a sort of just a love of them, I really do love them. I think they're wonderful, wonderful creatures. Obviously, I wouldn't say that to one of their faces, though.
Sure. I think they get a better rap, and it's making me want to run orcs, like run an orc game or run a game where you have to. That's hobgoblins, isn't it? What is it, Against the Red Hand or something? What is that fucking called?
Oh,
a really famous like adventure path, where it's like a hobgoblin invasion or whatever. It would be interesting to see an orc one too. And I'm sure they're out there. Some of the old D&D modules probably have orc invasions and stuff like that.
So do you mean running a game where it's the primary antagonists are the orcs?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's... I want to do that now. I'm going to have to do that now.
Do you remember that? There was way back. It was way, way, way back. It was when I was living in Cambridge. I was coming up with stuff in my home game, and you and I made that orc
The broken chain.
The broken chain, that was it. The broken chain led by Lashback, who is an orc
Yes.
that is an escaped slave and has made the orcs rise up with him as sort of like a more of a freedom fighting force than a savage one. That was good fun, and we had fun doing that, I think.
It was great. I've been listening to Dan Carlin, Death of the Republic, recently, and he's talking about the Teutones and the Cimbri, who are like Germans, who like appear out of nowhere, because back in the ancient times, people could just appear, and you'd be like, who the fuck are these people? Where'd they come from? Because the world was so small in terms of like nobody knew what was over those mountains or beyond. So like there was a time in Roman history where like 300,000 Germans just like walked into Italy because they were looking for somewhere to go, and they were like monsters to the Romans because they were like enormous, like very, very tall compared to Romans. They had like gray eyes and white hair, or like blonde hair, would like paint themselves all these weird colors and stuff. And to the Romans, that was horrifying and terrifying, because it's unfamiliar. And like you could see that with orcs too. Like, let's say you don't know what the hell an orc is, right? You live in a human town or whatever, and then, or a human civilization, even something like Rome, and then over these mountains come 300,000 orcs, and you're like, what the hell are those things? They're enormous, they're hairy, they have tusks. What are they? Like, it's the same situation. And the fear of like the unknown, like if we fight these, are they just going to eat us? Like, what's going to happen? There's lots you can do with it, I think.
I mean, that's just made me really excited. I want to play in a game where like I'm just a friggin' lowly towns member who has to sort of help in the rallying like attempt to halt their progress across really cool. in the opening stages of an invasion. I would love that based on that.
The thing that's interesting about like those people migrations, not to get too nerdy about it, but like they're moving because something,
what we're here for.
Something is pushing them from where they are, right? So like, so often, like the Huns pushed all the Germanic peoples just west, and they came into Rome and stuff because they had to run away from the Huns. So if you imagine like the orcs are running from something to get to where they are, so what the hell's behind them? Like what's making them run away? There's a lot you can do with it. There's lots of ways that you can look at orcs as well in terms of like how they're structured. Like it's generally a tribal thing, and you could say that they might be like Native American tribes, or they might be like Celtic or like Germanic tribes, or maybe they're not tribes at all. Maybe they have like a legionary system like Rome does, or hobgoblins supposedly do.
Or hive mind. It could be anything.
It could be anything. There's so many things you can do with it.
Yeah, man, that's pretty incredible. I do. Yeah, let's just run some orc games. Let's just do it.
Yep. I need another campaign.
What I was going to ask. We need another one of those, don't we? What I was going to ask, the Dan Carlin, and this is just a personal question, sorry to derail us slightly. Yeah. Is that has a new one come out, or is that one from...
A new one's come out called Painfotainment, about the human need to like watch painful things happen.
Why didn't I get a notification? I was literally thinking today, sorry to go off on a tangent, but I was literally thinking about hardcore history today. I was thinking I'm going to go and listen into that the Golok Holocaust one again, and I've already listened to it twice. I love its stuff. It's so good.
The best.
Can't recommend it enough. Okay, so what was the other thing? That's orcs. I think we've done orcs pretty well there. I think
we've given them a good shaking a stick at them.
Shaking a stick. So you wanted to talk about fudging, which I think will also nicely link us into one of your games.
Yep. So we talked about fudging recently, so I don't want to talk about it too much, but I just wanted to talk about like a real life application of why you shouldn't do it, but also why it's important to have the right players. So we played the 4th session of Saga, which is my ongoing sort of Isklof campaign, and I asked Lionel to join us from Two Guys Tea and D&D. That is not a catchy name, guys. You're gonna have to figure that out. But I asked Lionel to join us, and he graciously did. And it was his first session playing the game. And
amazingly, he always does well. Lionel, I love his playstyle.
He's great. He's an always yes if he posts interest. And he so he played this shield maiden Sigrid, and she was like one of the Jarl's warriors, and basically was given to you as a sort of gift so that you can go raiding. And you're sailing through this like sort of misty island sort of area, and you're attacked by pirates. And in that fight, Lionel received 2 critical hits. And like critical hits are bad in normal D&D, but in Iskloft it means that you roll on a special table that has lots of bad things on it. Some of them are instant death. And so Lionel's brand new character, first game, lost an arm and had like this brutal cut across the forehead. Now, there are lots of people who would have been like, this is his first game. It's like 40 minutes into the game and I've cut his arm off and he's playing a fighter, right? So like there's lots of people who'd be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe that's like something that I should, maybe I'll just say, oh, it's just a hit or something. You know, that's a good opportunity potentially in somebody's mind to fudge. But I really think it's important not to do that. And I didn't do that. And then he got crit again, you know? And it's like so unfortunate that happened to him. But like, the dice happen, and the thing that's so great about it is that Lionel was just like, that's fair. That's what I expect in these games. Like, that's what I want from these games. Like, it's a brutal world, and if something happens to me, I don't want the dice to be, like, changed so that I can, you know, have a better time or whatever. And I just think, like, that's a really potentially, if you're the kind of person who considers fudging, that's the kind of area where you would consider it. You know what I mean?
I absolutely agree. This is actually something that I was thinking about earlier today. Actually, I've been putting a lot of my focus on prepping Star Wars, which is the game that's beginning this Sunday, Star Wars: Knights of the Remnant. And I was thinking about the Force, as I often want to do. A day doesn't go by where I don't think about the Force. But I was thinking about the Force in terms of role-playing games and how, you know, when dealing with Jedi in a Star Wars game, generally speaking, I'd say the consensus is that you have the Force be some kind of presence in what happens in your game, because it's Star Wars. That's how it kind of works.
Yep.
So Lloyd, tell me, how would you deal with this situation then? Say you have a Jedi. Say you have someone who, like a number of Jedi do, have a destiny, have something that they are meant to do, something that they've seen in their dreams since they were a child. And then some bounty hunter comes out of nowhere and crits them and potentially stops that destiny. Do you disrupt the theme of the game, a staple of Star Wars itself, by allowing such a crit to land and taking the Jedi out and defying the fate of a Jedi? What do you think about that?
I would not. I would let it happen. Because like I've said lots of times, and I mean it very sincerely, is if you're going to roll the dice, then you have to accept the consequences of rolling the dice, you know? Even if that means having a real problem in your game. And what you can do potentially in that situation is you can, like, the prophecy ideally would be phrased vaguely, you know? So that you can then, after that person dies, twist it to do something else, you know? Like the destiny was that they would sacrifice, you know, they would become a great inspiration that would spark a fire or whatever, and that's their martyrdom, not because they become a great warrior. It's because they die in service and others kind of flock to that idea, something like that, you know.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I sort of came to the same conclusion as well. It's more of just keeping it vague. so the Force can be that malleable thing that you can use to influence certain elements of your game, but not let it control it.
So in the Star Wars games that I've run, I ran this last Conclave game, and in that, the Force manifested itself through the dice when it just appeared to. So like sometimes things would happen because of the way the dice happened, and that's when everyone would go dun, 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 dun. But I didn't kind of try and shoehorn it in, and I think that's important too, because the Force is, you know, it's impossible to talk about because it's so vague and everyone has a different idea of what it is. But to me, it's just like, I won't even get into it. But I don't think you should like have it be this like active player in the game. You know, it should be something that when certain events happen that you can be like, oh, that was the Force, you know? That
was the Force, yeah. I completely agree, yeah. Because it shouldn't be something that has like a motive. Do you know what I mean? Yep. Like the Force just is like, it's not working against people. No. I've never seen it like that. Like forces conspiring against the characters in the films and stuff. It's more of just, this is the way things are, and this is the way things are gonna be. Like that's how I see it anyway. But that's cool. Yeah, I'm with you there, and I think we can put our stamp on whatever we do in the future as saying that if you're gonna if you're gonna roll a die, then you better make sure that you're ready for what it's gonna take you.
And like the thing about the Iskloff game that I run, it's so dangerous running an Iskloff campaign, and I really like that about it. But like when there's lots of bad guys and they have lots of attacks, the chances of a crit goes way up, you know? And the chances of that crit is 1 in 20 of the character dying. So like every time somebody gets crit, they could just straight up die, or like be so badly injured that they're no longer effective. But you just have to accept that. And the players have to accept that, you know?
We definitely have to accept that. Yeah. And for those of you who haven't seen yet, I do urge you to go and watch Saga. It's a really, really great time. And you've already been told that there was a pirate attack, so this isn't really spoilers. But you know, it is a brutal world, and if we're going to talk about mechanics for a second, we're boarded by these insane dudes that attack us with 3 attacks, and we have 1 attack because we're level 4. God knows what they were, but they just beat the shit out of us for so long. But I relished in it. I absolutely relished in it, just thinking this could be it. We just got this ship. We've just got this plan together. Oh, we're going to go and sail, and we're going to hire some mercenaries. Oh, we're going to go and make a name for ourselves. No, you're not. You're going to die at sea. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I think that's the most important thing about that game. Among with the plethora of other wonderful sort of things that happen in the game. But I think that threat is always there.
You know, there aren't heroes in Iskloff. There's just people.
There are survivors, and
exactly, you know. And so even though you guys might think you have a legend about you, you know, because you're the player characters, like the NPCs don't know that, you know, like they don't know that you're player characters. They just think you're people in the way, you know.
Just trying to get by.
Which is what I think is another thing I think is important, that like the enemies shouldn't know that the player characters are player characters, you know. There's often an idea that like just, you know what I mean? It's kind of hard to explain, but like the NPCs and monsters shouldn't know that the player characters are player characters.
Yeah. Which is, I completely agree. But also, even if the monsters did know that they were player characters, the monsters would want to stop them anyway because they don't want to. Oh my god, I'm imprinting personalities on things that don't exist in this meta workshop that we've just created. I'm just bringing up the chat to see if we have any questions before we jump.
Loads of really good questions. There's another orc question, but I think we can answer quickly. From Nicholas Jacques. I don't know. Jacques. Okay.
Wrong.
Have you ever run a game where orcs aren't the antagonists?
So I can talk briefly about this, and only briefly because they've not really made much of an appearance. But to reference back to what we were talking about with the Broken Chain and Lashback, these were the antagonists, but it was the first time I'd run orcs where they weren't sort of the, you know, generic, we're evil, we want to expand, we want to divide, we want to conquer, blah, blah, blah. These orcs like have a genuine reason as to why they are a fighting force. They are a militant, extreme, and they are still antagonists. Like, I can't deny they are antagonists, but they have much more about them than any of the orcs that I've run before. And that extends to the half-orcs as well. The half-orcs in my setting were actually a result of essentially a breeding program to create a effective fighting force and an effective slave force. A warrior with the mind and tactics of a human, but the strength and ferocity of an orc. You know, like it buys into your Uruk-hai as well, doesn't it? Like
by fighting Uruk-hai.
And I'm not going to say that my half-orcs are... I mean, they're obviously heavily influenced from the Uruk-hai, and I'm not ashamed to steal. It's the best thing to do. But I'd say that I've put more thought to them than any other orcs that and half-orcs that I've used in any setting that I've done. What about you?
I ran one game, a 5e game, where it was set in the Warhammer fantasy world, where they were orcs and goblins, and they were trying to steal something from a dwarven hold. It was just hilarious, just the most fucking crack ever. It was absolutely great fun. Just these bumbling idiots. They rode boars into it was just madness. It was really fun. but the Warhammer orcs have a sort of comedic tone to them anyway. You know, the way they talk and the way they act.
Yeah.
So it's but I'm thinking more and more after this conversation that I'm going to have to do something about orcs, something with orcs.
Yeah, man, I want to see it.
Okay, we got another question. What is your process for introducing new auxiliary systems into an ongoing game or campaign, i.e. a new crafting system, dueling rules, ship-to-ship combat, etc.?
Oh, man. So I'm glad you mentioned dueling, actually, because I've been thinking about this for Star Wars. I've made no secret about this. One thing that I absolutely adore about Star Wars is the lightsaber duels.
Yes.
Lightsaber duels aren't going to be common in this game, as it's post Return of the Jedi. There just aren't people with lightsabers really at the point. There's only will be a few from what we've learned in Last Jedi and blah blah blah. So I want to make sure that if there is a lightsaber fight, and I've not planned one, but if there is, I have a system to fall back on. And I'm kind of nicking a few things that I've seen online, sort of doing my own little thing where essentially we determine certain results of the duel before the duel actually happens. So we can actually just talk about what happens in the fight. We can focus 100%, because the whole point of a lightsaber duel is the meaning behind it rather than the fight itself. As we've discussed many times on this before, it's about what's at stake, the personal goals and the personal stakes. So that's how I want the lightsaber duels to be done in this Star Wars game. So I guess that's, for me, crafting. I sort of just fly by the seat of my pants. I just let people kind of do it if it makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I suppose with this cloth, there's been a lot of developments in the setting overall. What do you have to say about it?
I will just bring them in as I feel like it, and I will let players know when it happens. I don't think you need to make a huge deal about, okay, today I'm going to implement this new mechanic, unless it affects someone's class or race or something. Mm. So with Iskloft, and particularly with Saga, there will be dramatic changes, certainly to Taylor's character class, because that is, really not great at the moment. It's good at one particular thing, yes, but it's not good in combat. And if D&D is a combat game, which I think it is, then it needs to be better at that. So there's going to be dramatic changes to that class, for example. And that will be a case of me being here, Taylor, here's the new class, go and remake Havisla or whatever, as an example. But also there'll be new mechanics brought in for Iskloft when I think of them and when I decide to bring them in. And you might not see them for 10 sessions because I might bring in cold weather mechanics. You might be in the south, but then when you are up there, then I'll just bring them in. I don't think you need to make a big deal about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that you discover while running the games. You just run Iskloft continually, and you're fine-tuning and developing these things. It's how you get the most effective stuff. It's what I really like when Matt does his talks about Harbinger, because we've been sort of privy to his sort of process and how he's been tweaking stuff all the way through the different versions and stuff. I just find it really interesting. And also helpful, because it's these are some things that you can consider, and you don't always have to do everything that the book tells you how to do it. If you're making your own stuff, then whatever works for you.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. Were there any other questions,
yes.
or shall we jump to the next topic? Or
there are more questions. I think we should do them because people have gone through the trouble of putting question in front of their question, so I can find them easily.
Wonderful.
What's the reason orcs haven't conquered your world already? They're numerous, they're stronger than most humanoids, and they're trained for combat at birth. So why can't they win?
Why can't they win? Generally speaking, I think it's because of that feature of the infighting. They're very, very, very territorial to each other as well as to their own, to their rivals. So in my world, I mean, to be honest, the orcs have only been a thing that I've started to think about quite recently, but I like to think that they once were much more prevalent than they were. They are actually because a lot of the races in my setting are kind of on their last legs, as it were. And I quite like the idea of the orcs being sort of in the same situation. So I think that would have been the case, like the conquest of America and things like that, like how the Native Americans actually rallied into one force. Going back to that podcast by Dan Carlin, he rightly says, had they rallied into a singular fighting force, they would have stood a much better chance. And I'm going to say that right now, I'm categorically stating that that's happened. That's what happened with my orcs and my set.
I think there is a historical situation where, like, the Chinese, for example, have or did for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years, invest heavily in diplomacy and bribes with the steppe peoples to make sure that none of them were powerful enough, so that if one tribe got very, very powerful, they would give money to the other tribes so that they can become and keep them an even keel and pay them to fight each other and stuff. So you can kind of keep them down in that way. And it's the same thing that the Persians did with steppe peoples. It's always the steppe peoples because they're a pain in the arse for every empire ever. But it's they did it with the Romans did it with Gauls and with Germans. They would pay certain tribes to do things. And so I think maybe there's an idea there. The orcs already, if they're tribal, have problems with each other, and then civilizations just pay them to do their natural thing. They encourage them with money or steel or whatever it is to maybe show those fuckers who's boss, and that's why they can never. If they, there could be a really cool, and this is probably what I'm going to do for this upcoming orc campaign that I have in my head.
It's gonna happen.
An orc leader arises, a Vercingetorix or a Arminius or some sort of or a Genghis Khan or whatever, who is able to corral them and make a horde, and make a proper force and is able to keep them from fighting each other.
I love that idea. I also love the idea that, they say violence begets violence, more violence makes more violence. I love the idea of diplomatically disabling the orcs as well. If you're not giving them a fight to fight, then they're not going to continue to be as good as fighting because they don't have as many people to fight. That as a long game to fight orcs as well is quite fascinating and something I might have a look into myself. I think. Good.
Dan Carlin talks about how the Chinese and the Persians use diplomacy as a weapon as opposed to as a defensive thing. They use the diplomacy aggressively. Okay, so that's there are more questions. Taylor says, when and how do you deal with intimate situations in game?
How do we deal with intimate situations in game? Well, why don't you talk about that, as we had quite an intimate situation happen in Saga last night?
Yeah, it's a pain in the hole, to be honest. It's not really what I play role-playing games for, but it is a part of being a human, or being an orc, or being an elf, or whatever. It is a part of being a creature, a mammal, because you need to reproduce, right? Everyone does. It's your most basic biological drive.
Also, if you have a story that doesn't have human beings falling in love or being in relationships or having sex, then it just comes across as sterile.
Yes.
There's nothing to relate to, and I think that's an important place that it holds. But I don't necessarily believe that it's integral to explore. Just that it's there and it's mentioned and it can happen, but it isn't reveled over around the table, because then it sort of gets a tiny bit creepy, and it's this is weird. But I think you did.
It is a little bit weird. Yeah, I think the fade to black is a good way to do it, and but it's still you have to make it clear that there is something happening. There is some sort of raunchiness happening, so you can't immediately go fade to black, because you have to be okay, there's flirting and stuff that goes into it. And I think yesterday it was good because Arnvid, who's the character who got with Taylor's character, he's a grown-ass man who and I was saying this in the game yesterday, who has gone on raids and has done rapine and plunder and but then it comes to an actual tender situation, and he doesn't know how to deal with it at all. He really struggles. And I think that's probably similar for a lot of people who live in a society that encourages, and it's every ancient society encourages you when you sack a city to burn the houses and take the women, that's. So I thought it was interesting to be oh, he doesn't even know how to.
I really like that you did that, man. It did. I got that from it, and me, my character doesn't like Arnvid because he was a vile human being to my character. Well, not he was a bit of a bastard to my character. But it just showed to me that he wasn't just one thing. Like,
Yeah,
he is the champion of the Carl, or at least he was. I don't know if he
yeah,
still retains that title now that the previous Carl died, but it showed to me that there was a little more to him than just being the brash guy who's a prick to me and is
yes,
the champion who is good at killing people. So it was a good opportunity for that as well.
yeah.
Um, question.
Okay,
I should
yeah. Go
really just
ahead.
open. I was trying to bring up the chat, so I said questions, and I don't know where we are. So
Could
if
you
you
give a quick explanation of how skill encounters work?
skill encounters, um, you take this, man. You do some really good skill encounters for against the shadow and stuff.
Yep. So it's from fourth edition. It's the best thing about fourth edition, in my opinion. I absolutely adore it. I think it's great. I stole it wholesale from Nicholas Dawson, who I had never seen them since fourth edition, but he does them in fifth edition. Very, very simple. You decide that there is a thing that's happening. You don't want to just narrate it, and you don't want to make it a combat encounter. So what you do, let's say it's a trek across a mountainside.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. Or it's escaping a dungeon that's collapsing. What you do is you tell the players you need to get X amount of successes. So maybe you need 3 successes before you get 2 failures. And in a success, one thing will happen, and in failure, another thing will happen. Usually the failure is really, really bad because it's often used as a sort of either a traveling or an escape mechanism. But it can be used for other things like crafting a thing or whatever else. And what you do is you tell the players, there's 2 ways to do it. Usually what I do is I say to the players, you pick a skill that you think is appropriate for doing this, right? So let's say it's escaping the dungeon. I'll say you pick, and then someone will say acrobatics, athletics. They'll say stealth, all these different skills that they could potentially use. And then you get them to roll, and you set a DC, and if they succeed, you tick a little box. If they fail, you exit a little box, and that's basically it. And you can make that as complicated or as simple as you want to. The way you make them more difficult is you make them need more successes before less failures. Is basically it.
Yeah, good. Well explained as well. And I think the success of the skill challenge lies with it being a accent in a certain moment that's happening in the game.
Yeah.
If you're describing travel and you get to that mountain, for example, it is a point where as a GM, you just go, players, you've got to roll some dice, and you're all working together to achieve a certain goal. And everyone is kind of into it. They're like, and it's also good to see who succeeds in the skill challenge and who lets people down in the skill challenge as well. Like that can be quite an interesting dynamic. Not that I'm saying they blame them, but like it's good to see and test people's characters in different situations. Say, for example, it's a skill challenge, but it's involving all of the skills that they are not proficient in. So it's a way of accenting a particular character's weakness in certain situations as well that will draw the player's attention. When something goes bad for a player character, they'll go, "Oh, I'm not great at that. Oh, I'm not very sneaky at all in all my heavy armor." It's just cool little moments that just you can add a bit of flavor from a different direction.
You can also use them for combat encounters if you want. If you wanted to say, like I was considering using them for a raid. So you come to a village, and rather than me saying, okay, you get off the boat, there are 50 peasants, and there's X amount of you, and then you line up in a shield wall, and we have yet another shield wall fight, I might do something like, okay, you're raiding this village, let's do a skill encounter, and you guys will choose, fucking whatever it is. Like, I'll use my weapon proficiency as a skill. I'll use my whatever, and then we can kind of figure it out that way,
Yeah. Its applications are plentiful, and it's definitely a really good thing to consider. Hopefully that has been explained to you pretty clearly. But there's plenty of videos in this community that explain skill challenges in really great ways as well. So I'm sure you will get them going in your game soon. Okay, I'm desperately. Here we are. I'm trying to find where our last question was.
It was Grayson Atkins was our last question.
Excellent. So T the writer says, what civs do you guys favor when playing Civilization? A little bit of an admission, I've never really got into Civilization.
Robert Coletta.
Never. I've always been more of a Total War person. I know they're not mutually exclusive.
Why not both?
I know, but like that's just me. Yeah, it's never been my jam. So go ahead.
I love Civ. I tend to go for Rome or Egypt. Egypt because you can build wonders real nice, and Rome because they usually have a bonus for whatever your main city has gets like distributed amongst the rest of your cities. Plus you get legionaries, which are great. Yeah, those or actually in the more recent civs, I tend to play Saladin, because I really like to play the religious civs.
Saladin. Yeah, cool, man. Okay, but cool question too. Kai says, question: HEMA and historical martial arts channels maintain that armor cannot be cut except in exceptional circumstances. Would you reduce the damage threat of crits for realism?
Do you want to go first, or will
I? You go first.
So because I play 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, the armor doesn't affect how much damage you take. It's just not part of the program. So no, I wouldn't. I think that if you're playing a more realistic system, I would consider it. But the idea of a critical hit is that it's a hit that hits somewhere where you're not wanting it. So a critical hit when you're wearing armor is like to the armpit, or it's to the, the crotch, or somewhere where there's like not much armor, like to the neck or something. That's what a critical hit is in my mind. It's a hit that is like effective because of its location, Yeah.
My only suggestion, really, to if you wanted to explore armor, perhaps protecting yourself from damage more, would be to look back to the hallowed 3.5 days where damage reduction was much more prominent on people's equipment and stuff. And generally speaking, as a thing used in the game as a system. Essentially, if you want to have a very particular set of armor that is really good at resisting, just have a damage reduction 5. So 5 gets taken off whatever, types of damage that you get hit with, Like, I'd say that would be the simplest way to drop it into 5th edition without, like, moving that much around and stuff. I haven't considered that. I'm much more of a just like... I want to get the fights. I want them quick. And to me, health doesn't. To me, health has never really sort of represented like how much points you have in your body before they all leak out and then you're dead. Like it's just like how you're surviving to me, which is very important in D&D. Vitally important with Star Wars when it comes to lightsabers, because if you get hit once with a lightsaber, then that's it. It's about your survivability, not so much your physical health, as it were. I don't know, that's just my personal way.
That makes sense. There's a question here. What's your view on the long rest mechanic? I've had problems with players trying to go around it, saying, I'm an adventurer. Of course I can stay up for more than a day without being exhausted.
Right. Okay, so I've actually thought about this, and I thought about it a lot towards D&D, because I would stay up all night for 12 hours at a time playing D&D. So I was like, look, I mean, admittedly, I'm not physically exerting myself like these adventurers are, but I was like, look, I can stay up for more than 24 hours if I had to, like, and if it was a threatening situation. But I don't know. I think a very important part of the game is the fact that, very, very powerful characters like wizards and like, whatever, need to sleep to get their spells back or whatever. And I think that's just a fundamental part of the game. It just balances. I say balance hesitantly because I think that word's just ridiculous in this kind of game. But do you know what I mean, Lloyd?
Yes. I think I would tell those players to stay up for 24 hours and then go on a 6-hour walk, or to have to do an obstacle course after not sleeping for 24 hours. And then they will understand that that's just not the case. And I don't think it matters how resilient you are. Sleep is like an essential part of every human's ability to exist.
If you don't have sleep, eventually you'll die.
You will die. Yep.
You'll die.
The exhaustion mechanic is exceptional. I love it. I use it all the time, and I think that you should just smash them with it. If they haven't slept, you make them exhausted, and like tell them like you are tired. Like, even if it, the first mechanic for exhaustion is like disadvantage on like saves or something. It's like not. I think that's what it is. But like that makes sense. You're not as quick. You're not as active. Just tell them to get fucked. Like, you're tired. You're so tired, after 24 hours of not sleeping. And it's not like you're sitting around playing D&D, like you say. It's like you're out fighting monsters and running around and like climbing fucking mountains, and like it's not the same,
I absolutely, completely, 100% agree. I have nothing further to add. Lawrence Kenworthy says, unrelated question. Give me good GCSE revision strategies. Please help. I need it. Lawrence, I'm going to be completely 100% honest with you. I was really bad when it came to revising for my GCSEs. And let me tell you why. I wasn't interested in a number of things that I was studying. Find ways to make sure that you enjoy any of the stuff that you're having to study. If you're not enjoying it, then I'm going to have to be honest with you, man. It's going to be harder, but don't let that get in the way.
Yeah,
that's the only thing I can think of.
Just think about the fact that like you've only got a couple more years of doing things you don't want to do. Like you've got to do this, and then you've got to do your A levels, and then after that you can just do whatever you want. And then like just smash through it and like suffer through it. It's only a couple more years, and you can go to college and do nothing.
You can go to college and do nothing. Words to live by, words to aspire by. Goodness me. To the writer says, have either of you ever examined the Book of Vile Darkness or the Book of Erotic Fantasy? Those two books have a bit of a reputation. So when have you, Lloyd?
I've looked at the Book of Vile Darkness. I didn't even know there was a Book of Erotic Fantasy.
Yeah, I honestly thought the Book of Erotic Fantasy was the blue magic book or something like that. I could be wrong. Blue magic is essentially, oh God, people that needed to get a life. Personally, I have witnessed the Book of Vile Darkness. I think
stared into its horrifying pages.
Look, I mean, there are some things that in it that were really, really rad. Don't go wrong. Like, and I always say it's 3.5. There's no shortage of material. Like, there was everything that you could ever want to be in 3.5. It was there in some shape or form. I just didn't like. The thing that I really didn't like from Book of Vile Darkness was that there were real terminal illnesses, shall we say, and how those things can be stand. I was like, that is just. This is horrible. Yeah. Why is that in this book? And it made me kind of like think that whoever thought that was necessary needs to take a long look at themselves.
3.5 had some amazing books, and before I ever played D&D, I used to just read those books. I didn't even know how to play the game, but I used to just read the books and like absorb all that. Like the what is it, the Book of Madness? Is that the one with the mind flayer on the front? Yeah, that's the best one. It's incredible. Yeah, that's such a good one.
Libris Mortis was a good one.
Yeah, that's a great one too.
The Liches. There was the Draconomicon, the Necronomicon.
All the demon folios, the Archfiends and stuff. Great stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my God. Epic level handbook. Goodness me.
Good stuff.
What's the beast that I kept getting the name wrong from the Epic level handbook? The
Hecatoncheires.
Hecatoncheires, yes. Yeah. Did you notice how I made a little reference to that in the?
You did, yep.
Yeah, I was like, it's fucking in there, man.
Stay away from that door.
Stay away from that door. Let's see. T then says, what limitations would you place on potions? Surely a potion of cure light wounds would not regrow a lost limb.
Ain't no potions in Istloft.
There have been no potions in Lawkeepers either. In previous games, I've basically just run potions exactly as they say in the book, and I don't really expand on that. If it says it will regrow a limb in my older games, then it would regrow a limb. But if it didn't, then it didn't. That was...
you would need a potion of regeneration to grow a limb, I think. Not a potion to cure light wounds. I think your players are pushing it.
I remember someone in a group of mine went and found some Huan Ti like ritual to make their limb grow back like a reptile, but then an evil hand with a mind of its own.
Yes,
it was so great. It was so good. Matt Click says from Fistful Dice, question: design your ideal game room. Money is no object. Oh my God.
Oh, that's a really hard one.
Okay.
I want one of those tables that Barker has. He has one of those ridiculous. What are they called? like I don't know, but it's huge. It's got like felt. You can pull out each person has like a little pull out desk, you know, and it's like it's just gorgeous. I would want one of those, the biggest one possible. I would want shelves upon shelves of board games, shelves upon shelves of role playing game books, shelves upon shelves of Warhammer miniatures that I have somehow found time to paint and create all of them. That would be nice. I would want an excellent sound system. I'd want a huge TV / cinema. I mean, if money's no object, I mean, you know, why not go for a cinema?
Yeah. I mean, I'm agreeing with all the things that you'll say, but I will add this, and I think you might agree with me. So you obviously have your big TV, which you can hook up for your online games as well, with the cameras and stuff and lighting and everything. But also your table, we're going to modify it slightly. So it's this super thin, massive HD screen that doubles as a table. So you can actually like just tap a button and there you go. You've got your map already on the table like that. Oh my god,
that'd be very nice. I'd also like weapons in the room, real weapons.
You need weapons. Yeah, you definitely need weapons just in case. You know,
just in case, so that you can, while you're describing how you don't even have to. You can just go pick up the sword and you go, I do this. You know, that would be great.
Not near the table. Stay
Not
away
near the table. Yeah, it's very expensive.
It's very expensive, but hey, money's no object. Matt said.
I'd want a bar in there as well. I think a bar. Like one of those extremely expensive coffee machines. You know, the chromed out coffee machines. I'd like one of those, and like a barman who works there, I guess, and a barista. You know,
he's forced to cosplay as different sort of like depending on whatever game you're playing.
He's the innkeeper.
Game. He has to dress as a Viking. Yeah, and like this poor man, we just ridicule him night and day.
That'd be terrible because I always describe barkeepers as spitting in glasses and then whopping with a dirty rag. You'd have to do that, and I'd be like, "Oh,
what, stranger?
You what?"
Hopefully that was I think you invented the best gaming room ever. But, A Fistful of Dice then says, I used to stay up all night in college. I could barely stand, talk, or think every time. I can't imagine foregoing sleep in a dungeon or in a wilderness. Yeah. Crazy. Jeff Doty says, how do you manage player spotlighting when one character is the obvious leader? I feel like I use up tons of time and conversation in Saga, but given Phelim's station, I don't know how not to. So from my perspective as a fellow player in that game, I am kind of glad of it in a way. It wasn't at all a feature of Jeff hogging the game at all. He's the person who's in charge because he's the Carl and he has to make the decisions. And I think, Jeff, you did a very good job of delegating and asking for people's opinions. Was it the time when Lannister says a king knows what he knows and he knows what he doesn't, you know? It's best advice in the world, to when you're not sure, ask other people.
I think it's really good, and I'm fine with it in my games, is that if you have a leader character, and I really encourage people to have a leader character because it makes the game a lot quicker.
It does.
Because we have someone who has the veto or the executive power to make a decision. You don't have every time that there's a conversation about what they're going to do, it doesn't last an hour, you know? But I do encourage those people, especially if you're new to like leading as a character, to just be like, okay, out of character for a second, what do you guys think we should do? Have a really quick chat about it, and then be like, okay, in character, make a decision, you know? I don't think there's any harm in that, because it is a lot of pressure for the player to be the leader of the group when the decisions can impact everything, you know?
Absolutely. It's something that I'm learning with Against the Shadow, and the character Faroth is, and in a way, we can actually segue into talking about Against the Shadow whilst answering questions, because we have had another session of Against the Shadow now, which was a wonderful time. But Faroth is very resistant, or had been very resistant to taking on the sort of the mantle of leader, and is slowly coming around to it, but at the same time, he has a lot of shit to deal with. And I don't think that Faroth, I don't know, you could tell me, Lloyd, like if I take up more time than the other people in the game. I don't feel like I do, but I could. I don't know. It seems like everyone's still on an even footing, even though it's Faroth that has the bloodline, the Tolkien bloodline.
Yeah. I don't think it... like I say I encourage it in all of my games that there would be a leader character. I take that from Nico's games, which is where I first saw it in action. I think every campaign of Nico's that I've played in has a leader character. So like in the Westeros campaign, I mean, it's me almost always because I'm a bossy son of a bitch. But in the Westeros game, I'm the Lord Maegor. In the Rome game, I'm, what am I? Junior Centurion. What's my fucking name?
It's
Nias.
got a game of culture in it.
Yes, yeah.
I always remember culture, and I didn't even play that game. I watched it, and that guy made my skin crawl.
Quintus Fulvius Calidus, that's my name.
Yes.
And he's like a junior centurion, and that's a military game, and so it makes it not only makes sense, but it's like it's important to the feel of the game that there is someone in charge who makes the decisions, and I just think it really helps. I found it to be really helpful in all of the games that I play and run, that there's someone with whom the book stops so that they can make a decision. When it comes to the point of it's just being a circular discussion, somebody has to go, we're doing this,
Would you, Quintus? Would I?
It's Lucius.
No, it's Quintus.
It's Lucius, isn't it?
Quintus.
I'm going to have to Google it. I actually believe you. I believe you.
Whilst you look that up, then I'm going to read this question from Alessandro, who says, what do you think of adding effects based on the type of damage?
You're right, Rob. It is Quintus.
Oh,
I get your point.
I made you agree. Adding to the bet, I mean, for the tenor. The adding effects type on, well, isn't that sort of done anyway? Do you know what I mean? Like, you get
I guess it depends, because some weapons, there's what's it called, Flame Tongue, which is by the way the best item in the Dungeon Master's Guide. If you can get it, it's fucking amazing. It's low tier, gives you 2d6 fire damage. It's unbelievable. But
what, on any attack?
It's just a sword that you can activate, and then when it's active, it just does 2d6 extra fire damage on top of the 1d8 for the sword. It's unbelievably powerful, and it's only like a whatever the one. It's a rare item, I think. So it's middling.
This is what we're talking about at the stage, with 5th edition, and I think it is for the best. But like that is like one of the most powerful items. Yes. Is sort of miles away from things we talked about 3.5 before, where it was you would get some ridiculous stuff in 3.5, like plus like 20d6 on like on a sword. It's just nuts, absolutely nuts.
But the games that I play tend to be realistic-ish, or for D&D realistic. And if somebody gets hit with a torch, I'll do like whatever bludgeoning damage, and you're on fire, or like, and I'll just have it like be a d6 damage per turn until you take an action to put it out or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, I hate it when you get caught on fire, but then you fail and you can't put it out. That's like I always find that quite tense. It's that and being underwater.
Yes. Oh God, no.
Being underwater.
My nightmare.
I hate underwater levels in games.
Yep.
In any
game. Was Shadow of the Colossus. I played the game, I loved it, but there was one of them which was a sea serpent, and I actually couldn't finish the mission. I had to get my friend to do it because I was so terrified of this underwater monster. I've got a real fear of that.
Such a good game. Oh my God. And it's being re-released for those of you who are PlayStation owners. Which is a shame because I am not.
Yeah.
More and more, I'm regretting not having a PlayStation these days, but that's just me. Let's not make this about PlayStations, though.
Let's not.
So we have other games to talk about, and if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask before we finish up, feel free to whack them into the chat. What are the games we played?
Vampire.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us what happened in Vampire? And yeah.
So we had discovered that a Nosferatu had been murdered by this Ripper thing, whatever it is. And there was a very tense moment as I was kind of like walking around in the murder scene, and I tried to steal some information and whatnot. So we discovered that that person had been killed, and that was a big deal. There was a very intense conversation about what we're going to do about it. Are we going to call the Camarilla, or are we going to not do that? and there's been this wonderful divide that's just kind of naturally happened where my character and Toph's character are kind of anarchic. They don't really want to eat shit from the Camarilla. They don't like them. They're posh. They're whatever, aristocracy, corporate monsters, whatever you want to call them. That's in Donnacha's and Toph's opinion. So I don't like them. But then on the other side, we've got Tess, who is a Ventrue, which is like the bloodline of the ruling elite. And she was a lawyer in her previous life. And so there's like a sort of movement in that direction for her, which is great because it's just this natural sort of disagreement that's happened about a really important part of being a vampire in World of Darkness. So there was a real tense argument and like a really shitty and mean argument that happened.
It's horrible.
Yeah, it was really horrible. And then she called them and we were told not to move, to stay where we were. And then there was another discussion and Toph and Siegfried left. Which Donnacha wanted to go, but somebody had to stay and look after Tess, and Donnacha decided it was going to be him. So there was this really awkward conversation where they were like sitting and waiting, and then the fucking sheriff arrived. The sheriff is I don't know what he is. He's a vampire, obviously, but he's something. Maybe he's given up a lot of his humanity, maybe something like that, because he looks more monstrous than others. And yeah, he basically like bullied us around and demanded information, and Donnacha was shouting police brutality. It was very interesting.
I had been very much looking forward to having because with, say, for Lawkeepers, for example, if I have someone who's like a strong character that tried to bully Marius, for example, Marius would have a pretty good shot at just killing them straight away, like just beating the shit out of them. Yeah. But with Vampire, the power gap is so vast,
so huge, between
young vampires and the really old vampires, that there is less of that. So I feel confident in putting this dude in front of you and just saying, and what?
Yeah.
And I know you
great.
like those kinds of situations, so it was very fun to play. But you did bring up a point which I'd like to get your opinion on. With a lot of World of Darkness, the majority of the setting focuses in the States. I've played the majority of my World of Darkness games that I've been a part of have been in America. And in America, obviously a very big place, and parts of America in the World of Darkness are ruled over by the Camarilla, and some of them are ruled over by the Anarchs, which are the anarchic, the rebels, the ones that, they still maintain the masquerade, but they don't want to draw the line with taking orders, essentially, from the Camarilla. So I decided that over here in the UK, there should be a completely repressive Camarilla sort of environment, because it's a much smaller place. There's only small pockets of vampires in existence over here. So if there is going to be an anarch existence, it's one that you're going to have to make yourself. So do you have any thoughts on that at all, as to a player sort of being introduced to that challenge, if you wanted to do it?
Yeah. I would say that it's much scarier in World of Darkness than it would be in D&D. So if I was a D&D character who lived in an oppressive regime, I wouldn't think twice about starting a movement that is a revolutionary movement. But that's because in D&D I know that I will level quickly enough that by the time that the movement is big enough that I'll be able to, take a punch or two. In Vampire, that's just simply not the case. And so as much as I don't want to do what the Camarilla tell me, I'm so new. I'm a baby in terms of Vampire. And so I kind of just have to eat shit. I kind of just have to do it. And that in itself is really good because I like limitations in my games. I like not being able to do everything I want to do.
Sure.
Because I think that I'm crafty enough to manage to do most of the things I want to do anyway, but I like it being a challenge, And so I really like that I can't conveniently go, oh, here's the 10,000-year-old anarch vampire who's also in charge of this thing. I have to find other vampires and put out the feelers and see if I can find enough of them to get something going. And then I really like it. I think it's nice in that way. I'm really keen to see if the Sabbat are around, because I played a Sabbat one shot once. I'd love to see if they're around because they're really interesting to me. And also the other creatures like werewolves and all that stuff. Something's got to be around. I do like the fact that it makes sense in England because, like you say, it's small and it's contained. That it makes sense that the Camarilla would just dominate there. Like it's easy enough for them to just be like, okay, there are 150 anarch vampires and there's 800 of us. We'll just kill them all. We'll just get rid of them all. I really like it.
I was watching a TED Talk today, and it was done by J.J. Abrams, a man who I really like. I mean, you can say what you like about his films, but as just a guy, he's just really entertaining to watch and listen to him talk. And you can go YouTube this. It's a really good TED Talk. He talks about this thing called the mystery box. Essentially, what's more important to a story? Is it exposition and explaining where everything is and what everything means, or is it more important to not say those things, because then you have that mystery? You're allowing the audience imagination, and in our case the player's imagination, to do a lot of that work for them. And I've come to realize that this is something that I do in my games. I don't tell people what's going to happen in the games. I'm very, very snarky when it comes to spoilers about my games. I start to notice I'm like, spoilers.
What's the God King, Rob? What is he?
Exactly.
It drives me mental.
No, but like this is the thing. Like it keeps people interested, and I know. But like the fact that you can withhold that sort of thing, I think is a very powerful tool. And I think for Vampire, because there are these established things in the world of darkness, like the werewolves and like the Sabbat, like they're out there. Obviously, they're all part of the setting. I've been upfront in saying it's the setting of World of Darkness, but I mean it's my interpretation of them. So how they'll show up in the game is the big question. And I have a lot of thoughts as to where a number of these things are, and no thoughts whatsoever to some of the others. Like there's a World of Darkness game all about mummies.
Yes,
I've not thought about the mummies at all.
And there could be one in the British Museum, like in there somewhere.
Maybe there is one in the British
Museum.
That's a very good idea, Lloyd. Maybe there is. But yeah,
there's also like Promethean, which is like you're like what are you in that? Like a fucking.
You're essentially a Frankenstein's monster. You've been put back together.
Yeah.
And your job in that is to essentially return to humanity. But the bittersweet ending of every single World of Darkness game has a sort of bittersweet thing where with the Promethean, it's like you become human, but you forget everyone that you ever had a relationship with whilst you were a Promethean. You forget everything.
Right.
So human, and it's like it never happened.
That's cool.
The goal that you're trying to attain is to forget everything that's happening to you in the game, which I absolutely adore.
But also there's Mage, like which is supposedly and they're somewhere, like where like are they associated with the Tremere? Maybe, like who the fuck knows? It's crazy, right?
And the Zemisi as well, maybe. Yeah, blood magic and stuff. But yeah, I mean, sorry, go on.
I was just going to talk about what happened in the rest of the game. That was most of it, I think. Like we got bullied by the sheriff, and then there was some stuff with Siegfried and Toff where they were kind of dealing with a very interesting woman called Ruby, and it was a great session.
It was good fun, and it's very liberating just playing Vampire. It's just like, do what you want, and you just do. And I'm like, we'll see what happens. It's a good practice in improvising as well, because I literally have no idea where you're going to go next. So it's good to improvise, but also have a little bit of prep as well.
So we have a question. How is Lloyd feeling about using Saga Edition instead of Fantasy Flight Games in our Star Wars game? I fucking hate it. I really wish we were using Fantasy Flight Games, but I trust that Rob will be a good dungeon master and it'll be fine. That's the answer. That's the diplomatic answer.
It's a very diplomatic answer. I understand that you like Fantasy Flight, and I've been in some Fantasy.
I love it. It's my favorite system. I think it's the best system mechanically.
Absolutely. But I have run Saga before, admittedly not as much as the revised edition, which was the one before it. But essentially, it's a system that I'm more comfortable with than Fantasy Flight. I don't know why. It's probably because I just haven't run any. But maybe in the future, maybe I will. Maybe I will jump to Fantasy Flight. But I don't like that being the way. I don't want that to be in the way of the game that I want to have happen. So Yeah, hopefully it'll go
It's
well.
not a
We
big,
will find out.
yeah, it's not a big deal. It's not going to like detract from my enjoyment of the game, and it's like a great cast and stuff. So I feel like it's going to be fine, you know. But still, I'd be like, maybe it would be better if it was Fantasy Flight because I fucking love that game, you know. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll certainly see. And for those of you interested, Star Wars: Knights of the Remnant this Sunday. Any other questions?
Very Alan Partridge of you.
Aha!
How do you keep vampire games in the modern era from just being boring politics among immortals?
Don't know. Just let them go on with it.
I don't think that the politics between immortals is boring at all. I really like it.
Do I? In fact, the humanity is one of the main antagonists of this particular campaign, or at least they appear to be at the moment. The witch hunter, the witch hunter. No, that's Lawkeepers. the Winchester contingency corporation. Sorry, is a sizable threat in the campaign at this point. Sort of espionage military force, or seems to be like emerging from MI5, you know, Secret Service, that kind of stuff. Like it's very cloak and dagger. It's very sort of thriller-ish stuff. I think it would be dangerous.
They are very dangerous. Yeah, super scary.
What were you going to say? Sorry.
I think it would be cool to see a session, maybe titled like Memories or something, where we all go and look at the things we knew in life. So like a session where Siegfried can go to the theater maybe and like take in a show and see who's replaced him, you know, or a session where Donica can like stalk his family, and a session where Tess can, you know, go see the law firm or whatever. It'll be interesting to see that, because I think that'll be heartrending and also like interesting in terms of like that stuff is not that far away. Like it's only been a few days, you know.
No, I know, and you know you can do those things.
Yeah.
You can go and check up on your family and go and see, who's replaced Jeff in this West End show. Oh my God, the understudy must be loving it.
Yeah.
That never happens.
Never.
I can talk from experience. What was I going to say? Overall, I don't find Vampire boring at all. I find it being set in the modern world hugely entertaining and really, really quite an asset to the game, really. It's with technology being available, it makes things so much quicker. If they want to go and get information from one of the quest givers, they can just send them a text. They don't have to journey over there again, you know, and then camp and then get attacked by bandits on the road and stuff. Where do we need to be? They get an answer. They go. It makes the game super slick.
Yes, for sure.
So, yeah, and also much more dangerous because CCTV exists and
cameras, fucking tracing your phone, all that sort of stuff. You know.
Yeah. So it's good fun. Really good fun.
We have so many questions, which is great. Let's see. How do you feel about ability score improvements during character creation being tied to race in 5th edition? I find it rather limiting. I would like to hear your thoughts.
Being tied to race. This is the thing. I was thinking about human variance yesterday. I was listening to Matt talk about the new, I think it's like the new humanity, like what parts of humanity you're from for Harbinger and stuff. And I was thinking about human variant, and I was like, why would you ever be anything else? Mechanically, you just don't get dark vision, which every other race does in 5th edition. You know, basically. Anyway, I don't know. Like, I think it could do with, why isn't there like a drow variant that basically is the same as the human variant? That's my big question.
Yeah.
Like, why can't you just have
elf variant? Yep.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I know they have their own variants within their sub races, whatever, but.
Like what I've done with Iscloft is try to limit them as little as possible. So what I do is each culture Menning gets a +1 for the thing that they're most associated with. So a Gunlander gets +1 charisma because they are leaders, and then you get 2 more +1s that you can put wherever you want. So it's kind of more adaptable, I guess. You know, more choice to you. Because I don't like, sometimes I want to play an elf, but I don't want to be quick. You know, sometimes I want to play an orc, and maybe I want to be smart. You know, but you can't do it.
I think that's a great thing to do, actually, because then, yeah, it gives you more options.
Yeah.
If anything, you know, it allows you to explore those races a bit better. Maybe if it was a bit more customizable to what you want. I don't know. I keep
Um,
losing our place, Lloyd.
Kaya says, "Why didn't you say more about Against the Shadow? It was great." We didn't say
we
anything about
haven't
Against the
we
Shadow.
haven't
Yeah.
talked about Against the Shadow really. As you described vampires, shall I do Against the Shadow?
Yeah. Go on.
So Against the Shadow, to catch people up, if you haven't been watching, you should go and watch it. It's a really good game that Lloyd runs. Absolutely compelling Middle-earth storytelling. But essentially, we have been the Heralds. That's the name of our party. Have been journeying across Middle-earth, and we have gone to the Blue Mountains, an area that is very, very unexplored in terms of the books and the films and stuff. You know, there isn't really much exposure of it. So it's been fascinating going over there and seeing what's going on. We're trying to get the dwarves on side to commit to the battle against Sauron. And at this point where the session had begun, we'd already spoken to two dwarven sort of city kingdoms, essentially, to get them on board. And after much hassle, as I'm sure you all can imagine, trying to deal with dwarves who want to put down contracts and who want to know exactly what we're going to do and being very pernickety, and essentially Lloyd really enjoying himself because he loves being characters like that, which is hilarious. We're finally able to sort of wrestle a contract out of them. But then we realize we have one last dwarven hold to go and visit. And we get there, and it is reigned over by none other than Thorin Oakenshield of the Hobbit fame. This is before he has gone on his quest with his brethren to liberate the Lonely Mountain. And he was a prick. And it was all a little bit weird because there was this dude next to him pouring honeyed words into his ear. This man with these blue robes and a staff and startlingly blue eyes, and he was really charismatic and always had an answer to everything that we ever said. He just seemed really mysterious and weird, and then suddenly it occurred to us, oh my god, it's a blue wizard, what the fuck? Because there are two blue wizards in the Lord of the Rings mythos that vanished into the east, and here's one of them. We have come across a blue wizard, and I was so happy. And he then proceeded to try and kill us because it had transpired that he'd done a Theoden. He'd done a Saruman and Theoden. He had sort of corrupted him and sort of possessed him almost to like that paranoid like illness that he just leaves them in the throne and basically makes them a puppet. So we had to try and liberate Thorin from this blue wizard, and he was an absolute arsehole, and Faroth kicked him in the face. How did you feel running that session?
I really liked it. It was a tricky one because I didn't know it was going to happen, and I didn't know how long that conversation would take, because I thought that was going to be most of the session, but I also knew that it could also be the case that you get in there, you're like, this guy's an Easterling, we fucking hate those bastards, and could have just attacked, you know? Like, you never know. And so I didn't have anything planned after the conversation because I didn't know what would happen after the conversation. So I think it went well. It felt... like you say, it was ripped from the Saruman Theoden thing. I think that's my favorite scene in all of the films, is where they go to Theoden's Hall. And I wanted to include...
We were happy that it was happening when we realized what was going on. We were like, this is amazing.
I wanted to include something from the East because there are thousands upon thousands of people there, of men there. And you never hear anything about them until they like appear to fight, you know, Gondorians. And it's like, what? There's like cultures and stuff over there. There's all this stuff. Like, those people were once of Numenor, you know, like the same strain of people. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. And I like the idea that the wizards had like gone and failed their mission and then had been bent to Sauron's will. Because why else would they not be around, you know?
Yeah. And then Faroth was all like, well, you need him alive because he will have been, you know, deep in the enemy's plan. So we make sure we get him alive, which was terrifying. Having like, if we hadn't had separate, like basically, Baragon got the surprise round on him, lunged forward and got his staff off him. If we hadn't got his staff off him, then we'd be telling a different story.
Yeah.
But he got his staff off him. He still battered us. Like with just wizardly powers. But we got him and we put him in a cell, and then Varro's like, right, we can get information out of him. And then the blue wizard just turns around, and then I realized, no, hang on a second, this is like if we were trying to interrogate Gandalf or Saruman, like, and he's like, I was locked in the depths of Barad-dûr for over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you can do that will make me tell you anything. Which was devastating, and also pretty amazing because it had a lot of weight to the role playing counter because of that. Yeah, it was terrifying and really upsetting that we couldn't sort of talk any sense into him.
Yeah. Felt sad, like something great had been taken from the world, you know, like this wizard who like could be another Gandalf, could be this like interesting and fascinating, has just become this like shell, this like another puppet of Sauron, you know,
a husk of what he was. And yeah, it was really good. And Farroth tried to go like full intimidation on him and tried to freak him out. Like he tried to do an Achilles and tell him that he was going to fucking cut out his tongue and shit, but it didn't work. And I was like, oh man. And I felt like Farroth felt shame and I felt shame. I was like,
it was great because he was able to twist that on you and do the old like, oh, your bloodline, I can see it in you. You know, the same, like, the Isildur thing. You know,
and that meant that I couldn't kill him. Because I was like, that'll just be proving him right. And it's like, oh. So, yeah, just really great role playing, like a really tense, quick, nasty little combat trying to fight a powerful foe. And thankfully, us getting the drop on him. And some chandelier swinging.
Yes. Yep. I wouldn't allow it in any other game, but in Middle-earth, I think it makes sense. It's the kind of thing that would happen.
Baragon can do that shit, man. People are like, Grayson says, Blue Wizard, the fuck? Yeah. This is the thing about Against the Shadow. There's no holds barred. If it's in there, it's going to be in the world somewhere. I'm guessing, right, Lloyd?
Oh, yeah. Yep. It's all there. Like, I've gone on so many wiki spirals. I found so many things, and there's so many things that will happen in Rohan and will happen in Gondor and stuff that I'm really excited about, but, haven't happened yet.
We're just still locked in the north. Once we break the north, then hopefully we'll... Yeah, God. It's great, though, because from us saying that we'll deal with Gundabad, we started talking about dealing with Gundabad, like... Session 12, maybe.
Yeah.
Is that the next
long time ago?
Session 21. Like, it's like, oh god. But it's good. I like these long arcing campaign arcs that we're sort of working towards.
You discovered as well that there's a Valorokar in Gundabad.
Yeah, which I was like, I kind of recognize that name, but I don't remember. And then you were like, oh, it's this really. What happens when our wizardly kind turn, and I was like, oh my god, what do you mean? Yeah, I've got wings and I've got horns and I've fire and shadow. It'll be fine. I was like, terrifying.
That'll be interesting.
This is the thing, and Dan brought up a really good point, which I think is a very interesting topic that we kind of briefly covered before we wrap up. But Dan was like, well, we don't necessarily know or believe him. He could just be saying that.
Yeah,
like just because we as players know that Balrogs exist in Lord of the Rings, it doesn't mean our characters do. So will that stop us from going there? Are we gonna go in there and I hate the idea of it because I know we'll get our asses handed to us by a Balrog.
Will we finish these questions, or what do you think? There's a couple more.
Oh, have we? Oh, if there's more, let's do them, man.
Yep. So there's a question from Mom's the Nerd, reiterating Jeff's question on player spotlighting when you have a character who's in a leading role. So how do you give the other players spotlight time when there's an obvious leader?
I think it goes back to the whole people knowing when to take advice and stuff. Just because there's the person making the decision doesn't mean there's going to be the other people giving their thoughts on how it should happen. There's a difference of taking the spotlight and hogging it and making all the decisions without consulting anyone. Yes. I think that's a bad thing to do. But I think if you are going to be put into that position as a player, then that player generally needs to have a kind of sense of responsibility out of them, like a real leader actually should in a way. Yeah, so I think it's important to ensure that the player that does fill that role is able to do that. And thankfully, Jeff is able to do that.
I think the leader thing, although I love it because I have the kind of players, or I play with the kind of people who all understand that it's a team effort anyway, and that it wouldn't work with all groups. Like if my home group that I played with, it would not work with them because they would just become tyrannical monsters. Like you need it to be a case where, like, although the character can be tyrannical, the player has to understand that everyone is playing, and you need to include them in the decision process.
Yeah, definitely.
The other thing that you can do is, it tends to be the fact that the leader wants to be insulated from harm. So like the Carl doesn't want to be frontline, and the like Maegor in Game of Thrones is not a warrior, and so when there's a fight, he steps back, and if there's like shady shit to do, it's not him that does it. So you can send people, delegate basically, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Yeah. T the Writer says, half the fun of D&D to me is shopping. All the books full of magic items and exotic gear, but I never seem to get the money to get said things. How would one approach a DM without sounding whiny? It's interesting because I know, particularly with 5th edition, the magical economy, as it were, isn't really a thing anymore, is it? It's which I personally more appreciate. I mean, I understand the joy of like saving up gold to buy your first sort of enchanted thing from a weird shop of knickknacks or whatever. Like, I get that completely. But how do you approach the DM? Just speak to them, I think.
Yep.
Just be like, look, I want this. I want to do this in the game. And it's not just the DM's game, it's your game as well. So
the shopping element of D&D is like not interesting to me at all. It's like never been my cup of tea.
It wouldn't be for online games. In-person games, I'm
more of a home game thing.
Yeah, because we just have a break and sit around, eat some pizza, and say, "Oh, I think I might buy this," or whatever, like before you actually get into the game itself. And then you can sort of role play the transact. See, that's the thing. I quite like the role play moments where it isn't like where everything isn't at stake. Like you're literally just having a conversation with someone at a shop, and like the guy's a bit of an asshole or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the way I'd approach it.
Yeah, I think like I've played this Gith game, the legendary Gith game, where the case was if you finished a mission, if you succeeded and lived through a mission, you would get a certain amount of points, and because it was such a high magic game and it was so epic tier, so that instead of like,
I'm good. I just swept my dice off the table. It's all good.
So instead of like dealing with money at that level, you would get points, and you could save those points to buy certain items. So like 1 point was an uncommon item, 2 points was a rare item or whatever, it went up that way. And so that kind of worked in that case. And but yeah, it's not really my cup of tea. I really like getting stuff, like acquiring things by killing my enemy or by finding it in a tomb or something. And I love getting loot. It's not something I often get in games because I tend to play no fantasy games or very low fantasy games. But yeah, it's not really a point that I'm making. I'm just saying stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think. I mean, the whole thing that makes magical stuff like more exciting is that you discover them.
Yeah,
they're like mythical items that you just happen upon, rather than looking through a catalog. Like, do you have Argos?
Yeah.
Can you just imagine just going into like like looking through a catalog and saying, "Oh, I have this." Typing the numbers in, writing down the number with a shit pencil, or whatever.
It's like in Baldur's Gate 2, where you can walk into a shop and then like buy this legendary suit of armor. Like, why is that there? Why are they selling it?
I can literally walk down the road going to a shop, dingle, 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 and then walk out with a staff that can summon meteorites that can decimate the earth. Like,
why are they selling that? Like, what?
What's wrong with you? So yeah, but always fun to think about. Okay, let's wrap this up with one last question. Mum's a Nerd Taylor says, how can talkative players that aren't necessarily leaders make sure to leave some space for quieter players and characters like Siegfried in Vampire the Masquerade? I have one thing that I want to say to this, which I've actually been quite enjoying quite a lot, which is in Saga. I think I'm I'm usually, when I'm a player, I'm the shy one. Like, I know I have a mouth on me, and that's the way that I enjoy playing role-playing games. I like to be confident characters that can talk to people, which I know you understand as well, Lloyd.
Yeah.
So with Saga, I'm not that character at all. This guy is he doesn't talk very much. It's almost like he doesn't like being spoken to, which I find really fun to do, and
Yeah.
it's a bit refreshing because it's something different. So it's more for my for in it, you know, in some ways it's for my benefit that I'm sort of a more withdrawn character in that game. But with Vampire, I don't know. What do you think about Vampire with Siegfried? Like,
I don't know. I don't think it's a problem. I don't think that Jeff is like not speaking because because he's being over. You know, like you don't. My impression is that he's not being talked over. You know, like there's plenty of time for him to say things, but Siegfried is like a quiet character. You know, I am very conscious of the fact that I do this because I will fill a silence and I will talk to NPCs just forever. It's my favorite part of the game. I love talking to NPCs all the time. I love giving them fucking lip. I love just giving. I love it.
Give me lip as well.
It's fucking great. It's like my favorite part of the game. You know, I love it. But I know that I do that a lot, and so occasionally I'll find myself like in the middle of a speech and then be like, right, after this speech, I'm going to not say anything for a while because I've just been talking for like 15 minutes in the game.
Well, I think most people are aware of that, though. Like, I think you're equipped. I like to think that I'm equipped. Most of the people that I play games with are well equipped with a self-awareness. They know when it's their time and they know when it isn't their time.
Sure.
And it absolutely grinds my brain into ash when I come across someone that lacks that quality.
Yes. Yeah.
It doesn't happen that often, but I mean, I can think of a few occasions where I've seen it happen where I've just been like, oh man.
Give it a rest, pal.
Give it a rest, mate. And that wraps us up today. Give it a rest, mate.
One more question that we skipped, and I think we should do it, and then we'll call it a day. So no more questions.
No more questions.
Hold them till the end. So Thrain, good name, says,
good name.
Sorry if this is off the overall topic, but I'm DMing a campaign starting on Friday, and I have every player's backstories woven together, save for one. Any advice on doing this well?
Don't worry about relevant questions. Very, very glad to have them.
Yeah.
So, Thrain, I think that that's actually a nice little opportunity for you there. I mean, it's all very well having backstories woven together and stuff, but there is something interesting about having an outlier, someone who isn't spoken for. I mean, it's hard to sort of plan interweaving character sort of backstories because, you know, that's gonna... Your players might not necessarily fall into line with a plan that you have. Like, it's just the nature of D&D. You plan for them to go west, they go east, blah, blah, blah. An example I can give is that Lionel, who plays Toph in the vampire game that I run, joined in a session later, and thus was not part of one of the main themes that is running through the game, which is that there's these three vampires been turned into vampires, all on the same night, all from different clans, and they don't know where their sires are, who they are, whatever. Okay, and that's like a big mystery that's been running through the campaign this far. Lionel's character is completely separate from that, and if anything, is quite interesting to have his point of view on that situation, being an external from that. Do you know what? Do you get what I mean by what I'm saying, Lloyd? So there are interesting ways that you can integrate people that aren't involved with the backstory of parts of the game because they can just have their own opinion about it and that'd be okay. And also might be able to help in different ways. What do you think?
Yeah, I also think that you like it's a good practice to weave backstories together, but I also think that like the most interesting stuff happens in the game.
Easily,
you know,
I think no matter how much backstory you write, like it's always better when it's in the game.
Yep. So I would say in this, like, if you have all those dudes tied together, like treat this as a person who has come into that separately. You know, like you say with Lionel or whatever, or with Toph, like it's just like an extra person, and they're tied into something else. Maybe, you know, even if they haven't given you a backstory, like maybe that's fine. They have a mysterious past. That's like a well-worn trope, and if it ain't broke, you don't need to fix it. You know?
Absolutely right. No, I completely agree. Well, there we are. That's it. That
Yeah.
is another episode of the Dias Cast. For any of the questions that have been addressed in the stream today, if you're watching this after the fact, if you're not watching this live, then feel free to put what you would do in those situations in the comments or whatever. We're always happy to keep the conversation going. Would like to hear from you. So, Lloyd, do you have anything to plug before we go?
Knights of the Remnant on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I
but
was going to
that's
do
your game.
that.
I'll let you plug that. What do I have coming up? I don't think I have any campaign games coming up for a while. I'm considering starting an orc-based campaign.
Yeah, an orc-based
so
game.
look out for an interest post in the next hour, I would say, for some sort of.
Oh, okay, Lloyd. Give us a little sneak peek for those who have been, with us. Like we've had a lot of viewers today.
Yeah.
A really, really good amount of viewers. So give them a little bit of a glimpse as to what it might be. Just a tiny sliver. Go on.
So I don't know if it'll be Faerun, but it will be a normal fantasy setting, including wizards, and magic users in one of my games. Can you imagine? And it will be a simple case of there is a civilization, and something has aggravated the orc tribes that have always been a problem, but never really been too much of a problem. Something has risen among them, and they seem to be making more and more incursions, and the players will have to figure that out and put a stop to it.
So Lloyd's running Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
But with a massive orc invasion. I love
Dungeons
it.
and
I'm very excited to see that. I probably won't be in that game because there's so many games.
So many.
That's
what I need is another campaign to run.
Yeah, another campaign. No, I might put interest. We'll see. So yeah, look out for the orc game. Definitely check out Saga over on Lloyd's channel. Also Against the Shadow. Do catch up because it is some really good stuff happening over there as well. For me, this Sunday, as Lloyd quite rightly said, it's Star Wars Knights of the Remnant campaign featuring Lloyd, Taylor. We also have Matt Click from Fistful of Dice. And Locris, my man, the man Locris is going to be joining us as well as a blue alien. What other thought?
He was born to play it.
He was born to play chess. And the weekend after, the Lawkeepers return for Chapter 14, which is going to be an interesting one. I'm quite excited about that as well. So, thank you ever so much for watching. And I hope that all of your performances are up to standard.